Welcome to Newscasting Ancient Times. I'm here with Mark David Smith to bring you Brit Hadashah accounts as though they happened today.
Welcome, everybody. I trust your week has been blessed and you've been a blessing to everyone you've come in contact with.
Now they're setting up camping sites. The people are coming in groves to hear him speak. And they're bringing enough camping gear, clothes, food, all the preps, personal supplies to last for days. I've even heard they're setting up permanent tent cities on the side of the hills. It's as though they think Yeshua is going to settle there permanently. What are these people thinking?
Well, first of all, let's not jump to conclusions. Sandy's talking about our traveling light of the world, our commuting Prince of Peace, our wayfaring Messiah, our wandering wait. No, that's what we're doing. We're the ones wondering. Every week we wonder more and more, what is Yeshua going to do next?
Well, you got that right, Mark. And this week's installment of Under the Table Sojourning just leads to a multitude of questions layered in more questions. Reports we get each week on Yeshua are like onions. Just peel off the layers and see what pleasant surprises he brings us anew.
Let's do some peeling there, Sandy Lou. This man and his cohorts spent 3 days on the side of the same hill teaching the public on different perspectives of the Torah. From what I understand, Sandy, various rabbinic leaders made the short and long trek to monitor this so-called self-proclaimed rabbi slash teacher slash Messiah.
Well, what could have been a debating disaster turned out to be quite peaceful as Yeshua's Talmudim monitored those rabbis who were monitoring Yeshua. Many of the visiting, let's just call them Talmudists, just mixed right in with all the common folk who themselves traveled a great deal to hear the so-called Messiah lecture. The rabbis just never just blend in with the people. Never.
That's right. I think we're finding that word of Yeshua travels faster than he does. And then when people arrive in his presence, they worship every word as though he is the words he's speaking. It's even hard to say. You know what I mean, Sandy? Because I'm not sure I know what I mean by that statement. But the more we hear what he's done, where he's gone, and how many people just keep coming to his events. Is that the word? Is it his teachings? I just don't know where to go with what we know about him, about Yeshua.
Well, you said something. They worship every word as though he is the words he's speaking. Wow, Mark. You and I are still never met this man, yet every report we get about him is different than any other news story we've ever reported, Mark. There actually has never been accounts of man that hold up the account to the accounts of Yeshua. Never. This is unique. I think what you're trying to say is every word he uses as though he owns those words. Okay. That doesn't sound right either. It's as though his words reflect his life. His words maybe are his life. That's as close as I can get, I think. And again, we've never met this man in person, Mark. Let's just say yet. We've not met this man yet.
Well, you're dead on with that, Sandy. But let me say it like this. We've not met this man, yet the words he says comes across his life, period.
And there you go. Yes. I have already talked to our producer about a road trip for one or both of us so that we can witness firsthand who this man is and what agenda he's preaching.
road trip. Yeah, I'm down with that. Yes.
We'll see. We'll see.
Oh, come on. That's right. We'll see. Look, when you and I first started following Yeshua, we were convinced he was a one time wonder and he would just dwindle into the archive pages of just another self proclaimed Messiah like so many before him. But we're finding, at least I know I'm finding, that there just might be something to, well, there is something to him, and I suspect he's going to play his cards and reveal something publicly real soon.
I don't think he can help it.
Well, what do you say, Sandy? Is the jury still out?
I'm not sure the jury has all the facts yet, Mark. They haven't even started deliberating.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us for another edition of Newscasting Ancient Times.
Have a blessed day.
Well, that was the only way I could write up the Beatitudes, because I couldn't just, because the Beatitudes part of the Gospels, which are only in two places, are just what he said. They're not logistically, there's nothing logistic about them. There's nothing we could say, bye, John. And anyway, there's just nothing. I kept trying to put together how to, because I didn't want to leave the Beatitudes out. And there's a short story before and a short story after in a couple of different places, but the Beatitudes are just the Beatitudes. So I tried to write something around that.
Well, I keep thinking of on Chosen when they are getting that episode ready for the Beatitudes. And so I don't know if you've seen that, but
I haven't.
Yeah. Anyway, my mind is right there thinking about that when you say that. And yeah, you want to get the Beatitudes in. And
yeah, it was. I thought about it for a couple of days. I started writing, and then I thought, well, I was going to blend it with another one and all that. Now we have a new intro. Did you see the intro? I said, but I apparently didn't. Oh, hold up! I do have it. I put it at the bottom and did. Hey, here's the new Planet Chapter intro.
I really like that.
I do too.
That's really great.
I like the part where the feet come down and
hit
the glass. There we go. There we are.
You did a wonderful job. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I love doing that. I can't believe I didn't have it loaded in for this week.
I know. I would have loved to have seen it at the beginning.
Well, I'm not editing the old one. We'll start next week with the new one. But
yeah, that's really cool. I love it. Yeah, so
I love making them.
Well, I have a word of wisdom for the week if you want to hear it.
Yeah, word of wisdom.
Our third president, Mr. Thomas Jefferson. It's going to leave us pondering. It says, in matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock. Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826.
Yeah, there you go.
That is
Well,
a word of wisdom.
yeah.
There's
You,
sometimes you need to flow, but on principle, you stand like a rock. That's
I
good.
like it. I
Yeah.
like it. So you know what I say? I don't know that you've heard, but what I say about the present president that we have is, I'm just biding my time.
Ah, oh, that's right. Well, speaking of time,
Yeah.
biding your time. Do you know what fat o'clock is?
What? What?
Fat o'clock? Fat o'clock time.
Fast?
Fat
Fast
is it?
o'clock?
Yeah,
No. Fast.
it's actually a time. It's fat o'clock. Fat o'clock is the time when we ditch our diet and start eating comfort food. And according to research, that time is 7 p.m. on Sunday nights. Almost half in the study fell for the comfort food between 7 and 10 p.m. on Sundays. Another dangerous time for your diet is between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, and between 5 and 7 was the third most popular time to abandon your healthy snacks and go for something tasty. Fat o'clock. Have you ever had issues with fat o'clock?
No, I don't. I don't. I just don't deal with all that
Well, I
stuff.
just
I
thought it was
don't.
interesting. I don't
Well,
believe in diets because I think you just anyway.
well,
So,
I,
but
I think we should be on a continuous diet. But go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, you're right.
well, no, that's what I was going to say. It's really about just lifestyle
It is.
but I can see that everybody is sitting home and you're watching TV or movies or something, smelling the grill. Well, now that it's getting warm, you're smelling the grill from across the street.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And yum, that makes my stomach, that makes me hungry thinking about that. And so I can see how that study plays out.
Yeah.
5 o'clock is mainly on Sundays between 7 and 10, but then in reality, it sort of says between 3 and 10. So, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I think you could. Okay, yeah, and it's between 9 and 10, and it's also between 11 and 12. And let's see, it's also one. I mean, you can just keep going with it.
That's
But
true.
I mean, right now I'm fat. That's all there is to it. I'm fat, and there's a certain weight that I know when I get to within even say 5 to 10 pounds before I reach that weight, I'm very uncomfortable and I don't feel good, and I can feel that I'm fat. And let's put it this way, and my wife and I have talked about this. She went to Oklahoma a couple of years ago to help her mom and dad get ready to move. And when she left, I had been weighing myself. I was 223 pounds. Okay, and when she left, she was gone for a month and a half, and I lost 16 pounds while she was gone. In that month and a half, I just lost 16 pounds. And it was a simple fact of moderation. It was not eating a bunch of cooked stuff every day, and going to the store and buying specific things that and only eating when I was hungry, not just because she cooked up a bunch of chicken and a whole bunch of other stuff, not and then getting a full plate and sitting down and eating it. That is not what I did while she was gone. In other words, I only prepared my food and salads and all kinds of stuff. I still cooked meat and cooked other things. Hey, John. And, I ate that, but I did it on my timing. And so when you're living with someone, it's expected that you eat when they eat and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's what throws us off is that there's nothing wrong with husband and wife eating together and all of that. You just got to, especially when you get my age. I'm 68, and for the past few years I've had to do this. It's just eat when you need to eat, and only eat when you till you're hungry, or I mean till you're full, and
Yeah.
not overdo it, not go past that point. And so anyway, now I'm back up to 223 pounds,
Uh,
and it's just rough to do when you're trying to regulate it, but you're eating with, not for, with two people.
See, I always tell John, my best, like do intermittent fasting. To me, that really works. And
Uh-huh.
that's like I don't eat till noon if I can help it. And then I would like to have the last thing I eat no later than 5:30.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
with John around,
Yeah.
if I'm going to spend any time and I eat something with John, it could be 7, 8, 9, and then I put my foot down. Even though but here's the problem too. I feel miserable if I eat past those time at those times. I like to eat early, and it really makes me feel better. It helps you digest. You shouldn't even eat 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. There should be nothing on your gut.
Uh-huh.
And
That's
but
a
you're
whole
right.
new.
It's if I try to eat with my husband, it changes it changes things, and I don't feel my best.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh. Yep.
you're 100% right on that.
Yeah, it I just had to learn it through the years. And so a lot of times she'll cook something, or even I cook something up, but I don't eat it. I've cooked it and we can put it away and eat it later, or she'll eat her meal and whatever each one of us eat. And if I eat, I might have a quick bite of something. But I'm gonna tell you, I'm just fat right now, and I don't feel good. Once I get up to right around 220, give or take, I just don't feel good. If I'm 200 or less, then I feel real good. I mean, real good. And
Yeah.
so, and I want to put the disclaimer out there. It's not my wife's fault. It's not what she cooked. It's not that she's around. It's just that dynamic of eating with two of you. And
Well,
I think that's a big deal.
and see, that even goes with Amariah. When I
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
Amariah, she comes in and she wants a big breakfast, and so I'm making her waffles or pancakes and bacon and eggs or muffins or all this. Then sometimes I break that 12 o'clock thing, and I'm like, oh, I really want some of that too. And and then I just you're right. The pressure of eating with others is what
Yeah.
it does create an issue.
Because the food is made, it's there, you're there,
And it's
it's
best when it's
food.
fresh.
And whether or not you just ate an hour and a half ago, and now the food is there for somebody else, and there's enough for you,
Yeah.
all you got to do is get a dish and put it in there. That is not the way to eat. It's not. That's not the way to eat. But especially, I think us Americans, we have fallen into that norm. It's a norm that I think we Americans, which we have an abundance of everything, and we can just get fat when we want. And I think it's funny that all of us say we don't want to be fat, but we sure don't do a whole.
Well, and here's the next problem with that is that if you look in other countries, they have banned so much of the stuff that we put in our food because it does cause obesity. Like most of the fast food restaurants, they use ingredients that are banned in Europe because of that. And then if you gravitate to that sort of thing
Uh-huh.
because of time and all of that, then you're going to gain weight naturally because it's in the food for you to gain weight.
Yeah.
And that's sad. And there's other things too, but our society our society wants you sick and messed up so you can run to the gods in the white coats
Uh-huh.
and use and have them treat you. And so our food is geared that way to make you obese or sick even because of what's
Food
in
in
it
hand.
or not in it. I mean, there's no nutritional value in much of our food, not what it once was.
Right.
So we could go on that because
Well, it's food enhancers here in the States, and I mean we can even go into depth on that. But I have been to a McDonald's in Israel and one in London, England, and they don't eat they not only don't taste like the McDonald's food you get here in the States, they don't even taste. You can buy the same thing over there, the hamburgers, everything, and they do not taste the same in either place. And they don't taste, Israel's McDonald's hamburger and London's McDonald's hamburgers don't even taste the same. So from one, country to the next, but especially in the United States, they don't have the super flavor that our food does at fast food restaurants here in the United States. And I think it's flavor enhancers
it is
put in there, monosodium glutamate, which
bad.
you can buy on the shelf to add to your own food, is, and I like some flavor. I want to put
I would
that
rather
stuff
have the
on
health than
everything.
the flavor. I would rather. I appreciate that the other countries have banned the ingredients that make you fat.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I appreciate that, even though it's less flavor. I would.
But it's also what we acclimate to. There's several kinds of acclimation in our lives. If we're here in the United States and we're constantly eating that food, our tongue has now acclimated itself to those flavors and all of that, and then you go somewhere else. Doesn't mean the people in Israel taste it the same way we would taste it if we were there in Israel. They've lived their lives acclimating their tongue to their food and to their spices and that type of thing. Whereas I believe if they go to the McDonald's in Israel, they find that food very flavorful and very good and everything because that's what they're used to. We go eat it and it's like bland as it can possibly be. It's like it just doesn't taste right, and it's not our McDonald's fries. It's not our McDonald's hamburger. And I hate using McDonald's so much, but that's a generic.
It's
Uh,
generic. It's like,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I want to even emphasize your point even more. When I was in high school, we had two German exchange students my senior year, two girls. No, that's true. We did have that. No, this was at a church, so this was later. But so a different lady had two German exchange students, and our food was too much. The flavor of our food was just too much for them. They wanted just a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, if that, because they preferred super bland, what we would call bland food. The, almost everything was just too much flavor for them, and they didn't like it. It, it, it was way out. So
Wow.
I can't imagine. I'm a person that cooks with lots of spice, and
Uh-huh.
it would be like, oh, I just a teeny bit of salt, if that, and
Uh-huh.
that wouldn't work for me. But imagine in India, if you eat Indian food now, that's some spicy, flavorful food,
I see. That's a spicy food.
and it's full of flavor, and It's
Yeah.
delicious, but it's something you have to acclimate to. And you know what? They have to get used to our food because we've had a guy that cooks. He's from India in our congregation, and in the past, and he has to get used to our quote unquote bland food, even though to other countries it would be spicy because he cooks with so much flavor. So you're right. In other words, my points all show that you're right. Well,
Well, so do you make pizzas from scratch, or do you buy pizza from the store, from the
I
frozen
have
food?
not made a from scratch pizza for years, and I that is actually on our agenda with Amariah because we have her um, on Friday nights and Saturday nights and things right now, and Friday days and Saturday days and part of Sunday, etc. But I want to next couple weeks, I want to have her get the dough all ready and get the ingredients out and let her make her own. That is
Oh,
on,
cool.
yeah. We used to do that
Oh,
for the youth too. When on our youth nights, once in a while, I
uh-huh.
get and make all the dough, get it ready, and then I let every kid. I used every kind of pan I could think of, make their own little
Yeah,
pie.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Very cool. So do you buy frozen pizzas and bring them?
yeah, I do.
And do you add your own
No,
ingredients?
I think about it and then I'm like, eh.
Really? Oh
Then I
my
add
God.
tons of red pepper flakes.
Oh yes, we have. I have a little container of that also. It's like as soon as you put that on there, now it's a Pizza Hut pizza.
Oh,
Because I grew up, at Pizza Hut, they
so
had
did
those
I.
little red pepper deals that you can put on there, and that always made me think of Pizza Hut whenever we did that. But no, my gosh, we'll buy a cheese pizza, or there's a couple of different kinds, and then add our own stuff. And of course, my main ingredient's always anchovies. Always, you got to
John
have
just
anchovies.
hamburger. He wants hamburger, hamburger,
Yeah,
hamburger. I
hamburger.
just want tons of vegetables. I
Yeah.
like my pizza with mushrooms and onions specifically and jalapenos. Yeah.
Well, all that flavor that we need to have on there, all that flavor
Yeah.
is the deal. And you go to another country, and they're going to make those pizzas up, but pizza in every country that there is. Remember, we've talked about this before. There are at least twice or more as many pizza
Pizzas.
restaurants in the United States as any other individual type restaurant,
That's
like
amazing.
Mexican restaurants or
Yeah, that's
whatever. There's twice as
as
many,
many
and
pizzas.
they're pizza restaurants. So,
I even did pizza for Sukkot one year. When we were doing Sukkot
okay,
here before we started
cool.
going to Monty's out there before
Uh
we
huh.
started doing our own. I would do pizzas and I'd get dough ready for everybody and we'd cook the dough over the fire a little bit, then add the ingredients and put it back over the campfire. It was fun.
Oh, cool. Very cool. You're going to need to get your information ready so that we can start bringing that out on the
I have
show.
it. I have it. I just need to get it to you.
Okay.
So
Yep. We'll do that as soon as possible. All right. We're going to go to the second third of our show, and Sandy's going to talk to us a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and discuss it with her. So we'll be right back.
We'll be dancing in the streets, dancing at his feet, dancing in the streets of gold. We'll be dancing in the streets, dancing at his feet.
loneliness. Loneliness. That's the topic of today. And maybe you're faced with it. Maybe you're dealing with it. Maybe you know someone that has, or maybe you can just remember times in your life when you've dealt with loneliness because all of us are going to deal with loneliness at one time or another. It's one of the greatest problems we face today. And there's nobody that's immune to it. There's no stage of life that's immune from the fear, even of loneliness or experiencing it. It affects each and every one of us at one point or another. Maybe it's the student who is lonely and due to the lack of familiar, they've moved, or new school or new year, and they're alone. Or that single person who is fears they're going to be lonely forever, so to speak, because they don't have a spouse alone, or because someone has passed away. Maybe your spouse or a family member has passed away, and it's maybe natural initially to experience loneliness. Divorce is another way. That living death of divorce can bring on that isolation. Or maybe you're a new mother and you feel that nobody is going to understand what you're going through. Or you're moved and you're a family or a couple that's moved to a new place, and you're concerned that there won't be any friends around. I even think about that. My granddaughter this week, when I had her at ballet class, she came and sat on my lap. It was before it started, and she said, "Sonny, I don't have any friends here." And I was looking across at a little girl I hadn't noticed before. And I said, "Look over there. She's standing all by herself. Why don't you go ask her to be your friend?" And she paused for about 30 seconds, and she walked over and she said, "Ask that little girl, will you be my friend?" That little girl got a big smile on her face. And then I said, "Let's play hide and seek." And they went off. But so even at a young age, that feeling that, does anybody care about me, or is concerned about me, or do I matter? That even faces the young. Loneliness affects everybody. And oftentimes you live in fear that it's going to be for the rest of your life. It's something you'll experience for the rest of your life. There's all kinds of feeling for loneliness. Most of it is because of solitude, or maybe it's the loneliness of suffering, or of society because you don't fit in. And we're not supposed to fit in, by the way. We are a separate people, right? Or maybe it's because you're experiencing sorrow or guilt or even judgment. The heroes of the Bible, of the scriptures, I'm not going to name them all, but some of them experienced it as well. As I will know, David makes it clear in the Psalms that he was acquainted with loneliness. Jeremiah complained to Yah that he felt like he was the only one who was still faithful. Isaiah knew loneliness when the people that he was trying to bring the message to, what did they do? They turned against him. That's the feeling of loneliness that can surround you. Even Paul, even Shoal, in writing to Timothy in the dungeon of Rome, he said how he longed to have some company now that everyone had abandoned him. So can you escape it? We don't know what it is. Maybe that feeling that maybe I'm alone. Does anybody care? Maybe it makes you restless. But here we've got to remember that we were made to commune with Yahweh, and he is always the answer. That seems some to say, stop saying that Yah is the answer, but he is the answer. So when we choose to indulge our flesh and remain fearful at the possibility of future loneliness, even, what are we actually doing? We're standing in rebellion against Yahweh. We choose to ignore his commands, because his commands, what is it? Be anxious about nothing, right? Be anxious about nothing. We're not supposed to worry. We're not supposed to fret. For Yah didn't give us a spirit of fear, but a power and a love and of a sound mind. 1 Timothy 1:7. But we've got to confront the truth about that fear and what it's fed by, because it's disbelief as well as disobedience, because we're not trusting Yah enough to be our supply. We're not trusting Yah enough to bring in the people that we need. We're not trusting him, and we walk in disobedience, a disbelief in scripture, a disbelief in his words, and a belief instead of the lies of the enemy. You're going to be alone forever. How are you ever going to handle this? Nobody likes you. Everybody is turned against you. You're the only one that knows what it's like. We could go on and on with the lies of the enemy, but they're there. They've probably played in your head at one time or another. But we have this disobedience because we fail to trust in his promises. And what do? We indulge our flesh. We contemplate. We dwell on that feeling of loneliness, which could turn to depression. And then it becomes a spirit that really attaches itself to us. And we seem to can't get it. It's hard to get away from it. But in order to pursue freedom from fear, what we must do? We've got to identify and oppose those lies that the enemy tries to place in our head. Got to remember, people who are lonely often struggle with feelings of emptiness, right? Uselessness, purposelessness. And as I said, depression oftentimes follows. But Yah tells us over and over that we're not alone, that he wants to deliver us, that he wants to comfort us, that he wants to heal us, that he wants to encounter us, that he wants to be that. He wants to be there for us. He wants to be that who we turn to. Sometimes when tragedy occurs, that hurt can seem unbearable, yes. And without help, that sense of loneliness can settle in. We can't let that happen. We can't dwell on it. We can't, because it comes like a cloud that doesn't even seem to go away. But we don't have to live with that feeling, because we need to understand that being alone doesn't mean lonely. It doesn't. Loneliness is not the same thing. We know that being alone is not emotionally damaging. In fact, it can be healing. It can be a time that you are able to draw near to Yahweh as never before. Loneliness is more than just being by myself. It's being apart from myself. So when you're lonely, you're confronted with that feeling that you don't matter. And where does that come from? Identify the source, folks. Being alone doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Maybe you try to overcome your experience of insignificance by searching for something out of someone else, but you're not going to find the answer in someone else. You're going to find the answer in Yah, him alone. Eric Clapton said, if my baby would just come back again, I'd feel much better, and at least I'd have a friend. Not really so. Not really so. Because if we're searching for our fulfillment in others, then we're failing to look at who is the true fulfillment, who fills our lives, and that's Yeshua. So filling that space in us that's created by loneliness with the affirmation of other people is like taking an aspirin for heart disease. It's not going to work. It helps a little, but it's not going to solve that cure. David grew up lonely. Think about his life. I mean, not alone. Let's say alone, very much alone a lot of the time, because he was a shepherd out by himself. He was surrounded by sheep much of the day, most of the time. There wasn't a lot of people around him, days and weeks and months alone with the sheep. But there was no indication at that time that he ever felt lonely and had that thing, or depressed. He was the king and the most powerful person in the world, a hero, and he had wives and concubines, etc., all of this attention. Yet one evening when his men went off to war, he stayed behind in the palace and he fell into loneliness. And what did he do? He had an affair. So when he was alone and with nothing except sheep, he did not experience the loneliness, but when he had everything, he did. Wow, that says something, doesn't it? So how was it that when he was just a young shepherd, that this kind of feeling didn't attach itself? But when he was older, it did. When he had everything he wanted, he fell into sin because of his loneliness. Now, I'm not talking you're going to do outright sin because of loneliness, but even dwelling on those things that the lies of the enemy is a sin. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to take every thought captive. So Psalm 25, we hear his cry that he is lonely and afflicted. The word afflicted is anah, which means to be wretched, miserable, sad. So that's what David's describing. David was lonely and said, how could this be? Verse 18 says, look upon my affliction and my trouble and forgive all my sin. The word trouble there is sarar, S-A-R-A-R, which means to compress or squeeze. In the midst of his misery, he felt like he was being squeezed to death. He was lonely and things weren't right in his life. So what does he do? He gives the secret to his trouble. Forgive all my sin. Wow, is that the answer? Well, yes, teshuvah is often the answer. He realized that his loneliness and his depression stem from the own sins that he's allowed in his life, that he's done. And again, I'm not saying it has to be outright like murder and an adulterous affair, etc. It can just be not trusting Yah and his word, not following his commands, dwelling on things that we're not supposed to. It's wrong. So while a shepherd, his sins were, what did he do? Probably he's out there alone, spending time alone, and he had that time with Yah, and he was able to reconcile, to confess, to teshuva at that time, to be intimate with Yahweh. So he never felt alone. And then he enjoyed his presence all the time. But let's look back at verse 16 where it says, turn to me. That word is panah, which means before, in front of. And it also is a word used for the presence of God. David is pleading with Yahweh for his presence because of his sins. He no longer feels the presence of Yahweh because we're so consumed with what's within ourselves, because we're so consumed with our own feelings and self-reflection. Instead of putting outward, we don't feel the presence of Yah anymore, and we feel lonely. When in reality, when we're dealing with something, we need to go find other people that are dealing with that same thing and reach out to them, because that is going to be healing. So this word for lonely here is yachad, and it means to be alone and lonely, but it's also used for unity. So yachad has this idea of oneness, like being in unity with someone who would make you yachad. That's the opposite of lonely, right? But there's another reason for this word, because you can be united with Yahweh like David was at times in his life and still feel lonely. So like David, our sin's going to keep us from his presence. Dwelling on the enemy's words, those snake eggs, as we talked about, I believe the last time we were together, are hatching spider webs and snake eggs in our minds. That's going to matter, and it's going to change our outlook, change how we see things, change everything. Yah wants to be united with us, but oftentimes we push him away. We were created in his image, and if we feel lonely without his presence, how do you think Yah feels when he can't come be with us? He wants to be with us, and we push him away because we would rather dwell on the why me, oh me, what if, and all these things. I'm not saying those feelings at one moment are valid, but to sit there and eat them and dwell on them and wound them in your mind is going to affect you adversely. Van Gogh, think about Van Gogh. His whole life, he was considered insane at points and had paintings and that never sold for anything until his death. Even that when he was institutionalized, it wasn't, the paintings there became some of the most expensive in the world, but after his death. God can take that loneliness in your life and make something beautiful, but we need to remember it can become a spirit that attaches to us and can affect everything. So we need to let Yah heal that wound within us and begin to dwell on his word and to trust him and let that wound heal. Because when there's a wound there, it can be infected, and loneliness can become that infection that spreads throughout our body and can affect us adversely. Because Yahweh has provided our emotional restoration through Yeshua. He's provided it. And while it's true that we may always miss the person or the thing or the community or something that we've lost, it doesn't mean we have to suffer permanent loneliness. We need to know that Yah is with us all the time. He is always with us, and he'll never leave us or forsake us. Hebrews 13:5. Loneliness sometimes leads to questions. What if I'm alone for the rest of my life? What if? Stop the what ifs. We've got to stop the what ifs, because we're never going to be able to answer all the what ifs. We're not supposed to, because those things we're not supposed to be dwelling on them. We need to press in to the new way, the new thing, the promotion even that Yah has given us, this new life. And when something traumatic happens, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture because we think everything's gone and lost. No, it's not. It's a time of promotion. It's a time when Yah is shifting things and wants to draw close to you. Life's not over. There's a season that's passed and there's a new season about to begin. We need to step into it with trust and faith. That's what we need to do. Not just passively sit by and say, hey, this and this, I'm forever like this, and become stuck and bogged down. We've got to remove the lies from our life. What does the word say? Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things. Change the atmosphere. Put worship around you, because he says he's never going to leave us or forsake us, right? So when we ache with loneliness or we're crippled with fear of impending loneliness, we are living according to the lies of the enemy. when we can willingly trust and believe his promises, we're going to be able to experience freedom and peace and joy. We cannot and should not reject his presence, but instead run straight to his arms. And remember, being alone doesn't have to mean that you're lonely. No, it doesn't. But this stage in your life, it's a new season. It's a new thing that God wants to do in you and through you. So we draw close to him and he can make the way. He'll bring new friends. He'll bring new community. And remember, as long as you have a congregation and you're gathering, as long as you have people, as long you're never going to be alone. Reach out, but mostly to him. Mark, come on in.
You caught me off guard. I was making notes. Hey, that might be better if I brought my microphone over. Can you hear me better now?
It sounds good.
A little good. Okay. Interesting. I just love it when you talk. I love to make notes and think about what you said. What you started off with, a very young person that sees someone else that appears to be lonely or by themselves, to me is an extreme positive personality. The fact that they recognize that somebody that is by themselves might be lonely, because I don't think everybody thinks that way, and especially a little kid. And so, the fact that I don't know, how old was she when
They're both 5. Is
both
Amariah and another little girl.
Well, but Amariah at 5 years old, to me, being able to recognize that this other girl might be lonely is a very good, very good indication that she will grow up with empathy, for others and everything. Whereas I am sure, and I can't really name it off, for sure, but there are children that don't have that. And of course, the children's whole personality and their characteristics are developed being around their parents. It's interesting that, there's even been like movies called The Good Son, and different depictions of children in different ways. But I thought that was really a good scenario, kind of, and I would almost say that child that recognizes that another child, or even an adult or whatever, is possibly lonely because they're alone, will not be lonely themselves when they grow up, and probably will have a less susceptibility to suicide, or treating other people's wrongly, or being a bully, that type of thing, which is this is a subject that can have 1,000 different rabbi trails here.
True.
Because, I mentioned the word bully. When, as adults, we understand that bullies lash out most likely because they are lonely. It is what they know to do, to put people down or to make people feel less than the person that's the bully. Is I think if you would talk to psychiatrists, they would tell you that is a lashing out in some ways, because they're lonely, because they don't know how to act towards someone. So if they make themselves feel superior by making you feel less, then it almost kind of justifies my loneliness. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I have heard some teachings on this, but always when I think of the word bully or think of somebody that's bullying, I always think of loneliness. I always think how lonely must that person be, because everyone around them is probably on edge. In other words, they don't want to be around that person. They don't want to be talked bad to. It's interesting. We've talked about my family being arrogant and some of the ways that they are and the way that I was raised, and and I talk about my brother quite often. My brother has that bully tendencies, and I know even though he was part of our family, he is part of it's just me and my brother left anymore. Everybody else is gone. But we were all we all just didn't want to be around him because we didn't know what he was going to say. And I know that there were times he wouldn't act like it, but I know he was lonely. I know for a fact he was. And I don't know about today. I know he has friends and people that he's with. But I wrote down, and at what age do you stop asking, do you need a friend? When you're talking about Amarai going
Should
over.
we ever?
No, we shouldn't. We should never. But I think just that question, I think as adults, we find another way around asking that question. In other words, maybe start the conversation with somebody that we think might be lonely. Start it in a different way with, do you like movies? That kind of thing, and get into a conversation where you can find out if they're lonely, rather than me walking up to you and I'm 68 and what you're like 31 or something like that. And I walk up to you and I say, Sandy, are you lonely? Do you need a friend?
Our natural spot. No, I'm fine.
That's all. Yeah, exactly. We kind of grow out of that, and that's why my thought came.
The pureness and innocence of a kid.
Yeah, I can see a 5-year-old, but at what age do we grow out of, changing our questions and changing our whole attitude towards that? But very, very good way to think through that for each one of us too. Being on an island, it's interesting. You had briefly mentioned something like that, and I'm thinking of a deserted island. If we ever got caught up on a deserted island by ourselves, there's God. There is my Messiah. There's I hope that I have enough of a relationship with God, the Most High, that it would, even though I can't see, I can visualize. I can know that my God is with me, and it's different though, Sandy. It's different. That relationship with someone that is there and that you can talk to and you feel the presence is different than a physical human being being around that way. So I think personally for me, if I were lonely for a physical human being around me, then God would not take the place of that, because I think those are two different things. Now, to me, being without God, not having God in my life and having that relationship with God in my life, I would be lonely. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I could have all the physical people around me all the time. I could have a job and be social and everything, and have that physical relationships with people. And because of that, really not be lonely. But if I didn't have God in my, let's put it this way. I think if you never had God in your life, you could still need that. But if I had God in my life and I walked away, okay, then I think I would slowly start noticing that I was lonely for God. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yes, because there's only for everybody, even those that have never known God, you're looking for your answers and you're looking for fulfillment in everything and everyone but Yah. And he has to be your ultimate fulfillment first.
Uh-huh.
People can experience a loneliness even if they have friends and family and husbands and wives, etc. Because we're talking about something that becomes a spiritual issue, and we're talking about not trusting God's word because you how does that happen? Because you're dwelling on things that he's told you not to dwell on. And it takes over your thought process. And then it affects your actions. It affects how you see friends. It affects how you interact, because all of a sudden you're so inwardly focused that you act, you come off differently. You stop approaching because you think everybody should approach you. There's a whole myriad of things that happen because we're not trusting God's word, because we're not taking our thoughts captive, because we're letting the enemy burst something within us that's going to affect every area of our lives, whether we're surrounded by people or whether we're physically alone. Either way.
Very true. Very true. Very good. I'm with you 100%. When you first brought this topic up, I thought, wow, I don't know how long I can talk on this subject, because I don't know where to go with it until you talked about it for your time. It's the first, and then it's kind of like, well, everything you say just opens up 40 new doors of things to mention and where to go with it. So and I haven't even touched on all my notes here. One of the main notes, I think, was cats. Your cat came up behind you and nudged up against you when you were talking. You probably didn't even notice it. My first thought was, cats aren't lonely. They don't care. So.
But saying that, okay, that brings up, we could just talk about this for so long. Saying that, I remember when Jonathan left home for college, and I remember I wasn't ever, I always heard about empty nest, but I never experienced that. The first time I felt an emptiness in the home was when after Jonathan was in college and all the animals were dead by then because they were all old and they died. And then there was not even a cat around. And I'm telling you, that raccoon did help. I mean, it was something there. So
yeah.
You brought that up, and it just made, and I'm not saying I felt lonely, but I did feel more of an emptiness there without any other living thing in my house.
Sure.
Okay, my husband, yes, he's living, but he's at work most of the time. I'm working from home. I'm etc. So
I love it. I understand. I really do. And I mean, this is a subject that could go on for a couple of hours here.
And you thought, what am I going to say? And now we've explored it.
I know. That's why I love discussion shows, Sandy, because I learn from other people and all the thoughts that it makes happen. I just love discussion shows. So anyway, let's go on to the third. We'll be right back after this. If this is the one, no, that's not the one. Is it? Oh, I'm way off here. We go. Oh, okay.
We'll be dancing in the
At this point, since that's how we left off, the last third of our show is that I love discussion shows. I think if I could do 12 hours a day, 7 days a week of discussion shows, live shows, I would in a second, just because, and I would probably jump in and out of most of them at my convenience because I can, and be a part of all the different discussions. But speaking of that, we have a new discussion show. And yes, Sandy, I do shows without you. And I've only started doing that because I found out that you do shows without me.
I do.
See, I never knew that before, and all of a sudden I found out. So I thought, fine, if she can do shows by herself or with somebody else, then I can do it too. So no, I'm just giving you a hard time. We started a new Let Us Reason Together Friday edition. Your husband hosts the Monday edition, and James O'Hare hosts the Sunday edition, and now we have the Friday edition. And here's a little promo for that. So your husband has a similar intro, only with Monday edition written in there. And I'm doing it with David Weiss, Rabbi David Weiss, and Larry Sikari. And we are kind of just rolling quite along. We're doing our fourth show tomorrow. And I'm real excited about it. I like it's the same kind of format as what we do and the others do. And so hopefully everybody will tune in and try that one out. We're getting a pretty good following. So anyway, very good. So where are we going? On our outline, we have assumptions, which is we had Gina Hood on a couple of weeks ago, and we started a survey about assumptions, but because of time, we didn't get finished. And I'd like to go through this list, and if we see something on here we want to bring out and talk about, I think these are good discussion points that we can do. And I have your name and my name throughout here. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to do that, but we had gone through the first three and we were just getting to relationships, and we assume our relationships will last when we tell intimate details to people we barely know. I don't know how often you do that, and I don't do that often, but you never know. You meet somebody, and depending how we meet them or who they are, we might tell them something that we assume, that they are our friends.
Okay.
You're going, no,
I'll say the spiel first if you want, and then I'll answer that. Before you assume, learn the facts. Before you judge, understand why. Before you hurt someone, feel. Before you speak, think. Sometimes being negative is better because you stop yourself from assuming, expecting, and saving yourself from all the pain of disappointment. I'm mistaken for a flirt when I'm friendly. I'm mistaken for mean when I'm honest. I'm mistaken for sad when I want to be alone. I'm mistaken for shy when I'm quiet. Wow, that's so true. Okay, you said something very interesting. We assume they're going to be in our lives. Here's one thing I have learned as a pastor of a congregation. when somebody says, I'll see you next week, I don't believe them. I assume that I won't. Why? Because I have heard that hundreds, literally hundreds of times,
Hundreds.
and I
Yeah,
never see that person again.
that's good.
And here's
That's
the
good.
next thing. As a pastor, as a female, as a woman and a leader, people will, if I have learned that most people will eventually use even your closest friends will eventually use it against you. I know that's sad. So
Uh-huh.
my assumption now, my new assumption in relationships is I'm going to assume they will not always be in my life. And I'm going to assume that one day they could possibly hurt me. So I know that sounds so negative.
Yeah.
I like sometimes it's better, negative is better because you're protecting yourself from the pain of disappointment. That statement right there is like, wow.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
Uh-huh.
And this goes back to our previous topic. Sometimes as a pastor, as myself, I do feel alone because I've experienced that from so many that I deeply loved and cared about. As a congregate, as a pastor, as a woman, as I've experienced attacks that nobody should experience. And sometimes from people that I've opened myself up to. And I can remember telling one group of people that came through our congregation, we're pretty upfront. We talked to them and we said, hey, this oftentimes happens. And, and they, within 6 weeks, they did that very thing and tried to rise up against us and told John, they told John he was Jezebel, Jonathan he was Jezebel, and that I was Jezebel, and that they would start leading our congregation for us because we needed to go get help.
Wow.
And that they'd been there I think a total of 2 months by that time. And they literally, and that's why I've always said I've experienced men to be Jezebel more than women. There's always an Ahab that goes with it.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And they took a whole chunk of the conversation, and I knew it before I went. I said, John, these people, they're going to bring a group in and they're going to attack us. He's like, no. And I was 100% right. So my assumptions now in relationships are probably most people would look at it as negative. And it does make you sometimes feel alone, but I don't have to feel lonely.
That's right. Very good. Very good. I get it. I think when you feel alone, maybe, and this is Mark the psychiatrist coming out again. He comes out every once in a while. Little, you have the two figures on there. I have one that's a psychiatrist. Anyway, to me, it's a trust issue, and it's too bad that you're not lonely, but you feel alone because you have to trust someone. So it's a good thing that you can trust John. That's why we have our husbands and wives, is because when everybody else lets you down, hopefully your spouse will be there. But I can see being alone because you don't want to be. You want to be able to bring that on. And my wife tells me that even though the countless numbers, you say hundreds, I say countless numbers of times, not just being in a congregation, but my ministry that I'm in, people treat me a different way, that I still trust people. I still do it. I still forget. And I want, to trust people so much, or I want to not assume this, that I go ahead and do it. And not every time, but a lot of times they come against you. They come back and they're not, I don't know, go into all
I want to trust people. I know that. I want to be able to do that. But I've found as a pastor, I've told this before. I can't have,
I
and this hurts my heart. As
uh-huh,
a pastor, I don't know that I can have really close friends,
uh-huh,
at
uh-huh.
least not in our congregation.
Well, we can be friends because
That's right.
we're like 1,500 miles away. You know,
That
it's
does make it difficult, doesn't it? And I hope that
no,
people
it
don't catch me
makes
wrong
it
that are from Life
easier.
of Worship that just heard me say that. But I have found that familiarity breeds contempt
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
because I am a flawed person. I
Uh,
am a pastor, a teacher, a grandmother, a mother. I am a preacher. I am a worship leader, worship, all of these things, but I am flawed.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. That's debatable. For instance, my wife is she does not want to be a part of anything like a congregation or even a home study or anything, because she knows those relationships that you build with people, you have to build them with this invisible wall, right there. And I'm the other way. I don't care. I want to be a part of a group of people, a large group of people, and the whole thing. And so I do it on my own a lot. So anyway, that's right. I think those last four lines are really good too. I'm considered a flirt when I'm friendly, and mean when I'm honest, sad when I want to be alone, and shy when I'm quiet. It's people assume. It's
Assume.
not us assuming.
It's
It's
people
what
assuming about us.
people assume about us. And it's life. Hey, welcome to life as we know it. All right, the next one on the list is friends. We assume they'll be there when we need them. It's kind of right along with what we've been talking about. We do assume that, but I don't know, maybe we assume too much.
But see, that goes back with our topic,
Yeah, it does.
our previous topic,
It,
because let's say you've hit this milestone, this thing, this shift in your life, whether it's finances, job change, death, divorce, moving, and we assume that our friends are going to be with us, and they will to a point. But when we're looking for our friends to fulfill all, assuming that our friends are going to take care of all those needs, that they're not supposed to, and they're not going
that's
to be
right.
able to either, because they have their own life and their own issues they're dealing with, their own people, their own family. And if we assume that our friends are going to take care of us, and then when we assume they're not our friends because they didn't fulfill everything we needed at that moment, that's another assumption. Our friends are fallible just like we are, and they have lives of their own, and we should not seek out others to meet our needs.
Very
See,
good.
to me, this assumption and our topic just
Very good.
pair
Exactly.
very well.
Exactly. Exactly. I like it. I like it. All right. Next one on the list is religion. We assume he will answer prayer immediately. If you assume that the Big Bang, what is it? Oh, if you assume the Big Bang happened, you're talking about magic, not science. I don't know why I put that in there. Good life is when you assume nothing, do more, need less, smile often, dream big, laugh a lot, and realize how blessed you are for what you have.
Oh, stop right there. When we begin to take account of what Yah has done for us, what we
I
have
know.
at the very moment. I don't care if our life is full of deficit, full of
Mhm.
lack of one thing. Do you live in a building? Do you have shelter over your head?
Mhm.
Do you have a congregation? Do you have online? Do you have somebody that's in your family? Do you have food on your table?
Mhm.
We could go on, not just the basics. We could go on and on and
Right.
on.
Right.
And if we will begin to take note, just like you said, if we will take note on how blessed we actually are, it should shift the way we feel, and begin to shift the way we think. Our biggest problem is we become that woe is me, and so self-centered. I always minister to people. You've heard me say it before. If you're lonely, go reach out to somebody else who's lonely. If you have been hurt in this area, you are physically sick, go reach out to somebody who needs prayer of healing. If you, whatever it is, go find somebody else in that same position and begin to minister to them, and your mind will get off of yourself and will sort of bring an attitude adjustment about you, so to speak.
Very true. Very good. Thank you, Sandi, for being my friend.
Ditto, Mark.
All right. Last thing on the under religion: never assume, don't expect, just hope, just pray. Just live a life of prayer, and you'll
I
have
when
hope.
you said never assume, it's hard not to assume in life.
Yeah,
But when things begin to disappoint us, we need to take a check. Wait. Should I have assumed this would happen in the first place? So is that on this person or this thing, or is that on me?
That's true. You become a cynic. You become a conspiracy theorist, of people, not just the government and everything around, but if you never assume and you don't expect and you just hope and just pray, you can become a cynic. You can become a conspiracy. You think everybody's against you and everything is, you can become that way if you don't keep a mature balance in our lives. So okay. Go on. Church and synagogue, we assume they will do the word of God the way we think they should. The way
Oh my. We've got to assume that everybody's in a different place, and Yah is dealing with the specific issue in them and a different issue in us. And he's brought this revelation to us, and he hasn't yet revealed that thing to them in its completeness, because he's working in another area. We cannot assume to be their God and be their judge and be all of these things to him. Now, do we speak truth? Yes. Here's what I tell people. If you don't necessarily agree, put it on a shelf. Put whatever. You hear something you don't agree with, they say, then put it on a shelf. It's something new. God may bring revelation. If not, you give them grace and they'll figure it out. Now, does that mean that you have to keep your mouth shut? No, you can always say, have you ever thought about looking at it from this perspective?
Very good. Very good.
Not, you know what, you're wrong. You need to do it this way. That's not what it says. It says that. No. Have you ever thought about maybe this?
Yeah, I like it. I was thinking, I think that line was written by somebody that came to your congregation 3 months ago and never came back. They said, we assume they will do the word of God the way we think they should.
There you go.
You didn't know I was in touch with all those people that left your.
Well, we had somebody write us this huge letter last year.
Really?
And it outlined everything that they thought John and I did wrong. They said you shouldn't pray with people more than once. You shouldn't ever have worship practice on Shabbat before you start. You shouldn't let anybody else speak. You shouldn't. It was boom, doom. I mean, it was a lot. And so we assume the word of God, they should think the way they do. Yeah, we have. Yes, that's all I can say.
Do you remember the old Pal Talk days?
Yeah,
you guys did that too, where you had only one person could speak, and then the next person could come up, and we had our rooms in Pal Talk. We had rooms in Christianity, and we named the room, and people came in. Well, I always thought it was, and I had this pat answer for of course, we're Messianic, and Christians would come in and listen, and they would tell us that we were wrong, and that, this is wrong. You shouldn't, whatever, blah, blah, blah,
You're under the
blah.
law.
And here's what my answer is. Always with my answer is, oh my gosh, you're right. I just got up this morning and decided to be Messianic. I just decided to do that today. And we just decided to open this room and start making up all of this stuff. We never thought of that before. Oh my gosh. And it's kind of like you're assuming we have not searched this out and know what we're talking about. And you're assuming that you can just come in here one time and tell us how wrong we are, and we're just going to stop all the believing that we believe and go over to your side. I never understood the chutzpah of the how they could think they could come in there just one time and say one thing. There's 30-40 people in there, all Messianic and loving everything's going on, and you could come in there as one person. Have you ever met this person, Sandy? Yeah, you see, I'm being general here.
Yeah.
We've met this person 1,000 times that thinks they can come to us or a group of people and just say you're wrong, that what you're saying is wrong, and just assume we have no idea what we're talking about, and that we're just going to jump over to whatever you're saying. I have run into people like this countless numbers of times, and it's like, I don't get your mindset. There's a different way. If you don't agree with what we're saying, there's a different way. You can sit down and talk to this person one-on-one, understand yourself, where they're coming from, so many different ways. But just to come in and say you're wrong, yeah, I just got up this morning and decided to be Messianic. I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to be Messianic today. It's like,
well, I think when we need to look at that, when you have a leader, first off, Yah appoints leadership. He's the one that does the appointing and the anointing for you to start this network, even back then in those days, for that, or for a congregation, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got to be careful when we try to come in and tell whatever leader how wrong they are in all these areas. If they're wrong, pray and say, have you ever thought about this?
That's it. Right there.
I remember specifically because we've been studying Hebrew and stuff since the inception of our congregation. We didn't do the world's holidays. We tried to do the others, et cetera, but we did not identify or label ourselves. We didn't know another group like us, but we still worshiped on Saturday. And this is how a person approached me from our congregation. Why? And this is the way to do it. Why do we follow his commands and worship and follow all these commands except number 4?
Number 4. Oh my gosh, this is horrible. What's number 4?
The Sabbath. But they approached John and I that way. And I was like, I gave him the spiel that I'd heard all my life, that I repeated, even though we were already doing all the other stuff. And I immediately, when you're approached that way, I went home, studied it out, and I knew about Sabbath. I was raised, Mom talked about it because she did Sabbath, all of that. But I came back because of the approach, and we changed everything within 2 weeks. But it was the approach. That's the difference between somebody that's just wanting to attack and or create split or just leave and finding excuses, and somebody who really wants to prosper within that congregation and is praying for their leadership's eyes to be open if they need to be, et cetera, et cetera. Big difference.
Very big difference. Huge. But a lot of people don't know this, recognize this, because they aren't a part of leadership or have not ever been a part of leadership, or it really does. They assume they know what it's like, even though they've never done it, even though they've seen what it is. Then now I know what this is about. Until you live it, you don't. Once you live it, you're like us. You don't do that. Like you said, have you ever considered? Have you ever taken a look at it from this perspective? There's different ways to do it, but to just burst in there, Anyway, we're done. Time's up. So
It was good.
I know. Always good, Sandi. You're the best. You're the best. But I do shows with other people too, Sandi. So
I know.
All right.
We are always welcome on any show that I might do without you. Of course, you have done Reason Monday with us before, and you stepped out of that one. So that one was
yeah.
But walking, I don't think you've ever showed up in walking before.
I have not. No, it's too late at night.
It's true. It is late.
That's it for me. All right, we got to get out of here. Hey, everybody, go over to, if you're not already there, go over to lambnetwork.tv. We have an on-demand section that is getting revamped, and we're always working on this because behind the scenes is always screwing with us. So we're still working with this. If you need prayer, top of the page, there's a place where you can submit your prayer requests and we'll pray over them. We have a prayer show 6 days a week here. Yeah, first thing in the morning. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sandi, you're the best. That's all there is to it. So don't worry about all those words at the end. Just pray and we'll take ourselves out. You can see Sandi on Tuesday evenings in Walking in Spirit and Truth. And so besides Monday, Let Us Reason Together when she's on there, and the Monday War Room and all that. But
and you can go to the
Life of Worship
YouTube channel.
Is on every once in a while. So all right, we'll see y'all next week, because we will be back next week. So thank y'all. God bless.
Father, we come before you in Yeshua's name, and we ask that we be light in the midst of darkness, that we don't assume things on people, but of people and for people. But Father, that we would listen to your heart and listen to your word and be your hands and feet in all that we do, that we would not get lost in loneliness, but that we would draw close to you, that we would not get lost in any emotion, but Father, we would dwell upon your word and draw close to you at all times. Father, go with us along the way.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.